Welcome. There's something about space that still humbles me. The silence, the size, the possibility. Even after all this time, it still surprises me what I find drifting between the stars. I am the gatherer, pulling stories from fractured timelines, lost dimensions, and unknown constellations. And thanks to Exxon Buzz, I can now bring those stories here. There's still something hidden in the archive, something massive. The more power this connection gains, the closer we get to unlocking it. So, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now then, let's explore what I found among the stars.
On the edge of a distant frontier, an outpost drifts between duty and decay. Time itself falters in its halls, repeating the same steps, the same words, the same failures. Within this loop of silence and suspicion, trust is scarce, and even the surest guides may not be what they seem. Here, in the shadow of Erebos, the fight for command is not won by strength alone, but by what survives the turning of the day. This is the battle for leadership.
Chapter 1. The Echo of a Day. The dust on Erebos Station had a memory. It was a fine grey powder, part recycled air, part metallic shearing, and part, Kaelen was sure of it, the slow decay of hope. For him, this remote frontier outpost was not a bastion of progress, but a place of mourning. He mourned the feel of real sun on his skin, the chaotic scent of rain on soil, the unpredictable cadence of a purely human heart. Here, everything was regulated, scheduled, and augmented. He was the station's sole organic specialist, an engineer exiled from the vibrant, messy world of flesh and blood and thrust into this cold chrome society, an isekai, not of worlds, but of being. He served as a follower, a cog in a machine he could never truly join. His only anchor in this sea of synchronized beings was Commander Valerius, the grizzled head of security. Valerius, with his scarred faceplate and a voice like grinding gears, was the only one who treated Kaelen with something more than clinical curiosity. He saw the gifted engineer, not the obsolete man. The day began, as it always did, with the low hum of the station's life support cycling into its daylight phase. Kaelen was in the observatory, staring at the static swirl of the gas giant Erebos was tethered to, a silent god of violet and gold. He was cataloguing output from the station's deep space sensors, a task the others found tedious. But Kaelen saw patterns where others saw noise. It was his gift and his curse. He noticed it first as a flicker in the data logs, a microsecond of repeated code, a ghost in the machine. Trivial. Anomaly C-734. He logged it and moved on. That day, during the second cycle, a conduit in the lower hydroponics bay overloaded. No one was hurt, but the repairs were extensive. And then the next day began, not a new day, but the day. The same hum, the same violet-gold swirl of the gas giant, the same flicker in the data logs. Anomaly C-734. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. He went to the mess hall. The conversations were identical. The nutrient paste flavor was the same bland, fortified algae. He knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that at second cycle the conduit in lower hydroponics would overload again. It did. By the third repetition, his dread had sharpened into a terrifying certainty. He was trapped in a loop. The Cyborg crew, their internal chronometers and memory banks tied directly to the station's network, were oblivious. Each morning, their memories were reset to the start of the cycle. But Kaelen, with his unnetworked organic brain, remembered. Each repetition was a fresh layer of grime on his soul, the melancholy of his exile deepening with every identical sunrise. He sought out Valerius in his Spartan office, the walls adorned with commendations for valor. The old cyborg was cleaning his sidearm, a relic from a forgotten war. "Commander," Kaelen began, his voice strained, "something is wrong, terribly wrong." Valerius looked up, his one good optical sensor, a piercing blue. He listened patiently as Kaelen explained his impossible theory, the repeating days, the identical events. He didn't dismiss him, he didn't call for the medical servitors. Instead, he leaned forward, his metal fingers steepled. "A loop," Valerius rasped, the word hanging in the sterile air. He stroked the grizzled stubble on the organic half of his jaw. "The station is a symphony of systems, my boy. If time itself is broken, if the song is repeating, you must ask yourself what single gear is out of place."
Chapter 2. The Ghost in the Foundation. Valerius's question echoed in Kaelen's mind, a single clear note in the cacophony of repetition. A single gear. The old soldier had not offered a solution, but a methodology. It was a lifeline. Over the next 10 loops, or 10 days for him, Kaelen began his hunt. He became a ghost, moving through the station's routines with foreknowledge, his melancholy a constant companion. He watched the same arguments unfold, the same jokes told, the same conduits burst, and each time the faces of his crewmates were wiped clean by the reset. He was utterly alone. His unique position as the station's unnetworked mind was his greatest asset. He could see the flaws in the tapestry. He began to map the station's energy fluctuations, cross-referencing them with the moment the data anomaly, C-734, appeared at the start of each loop. There was a surge, infinitesimally small, that originated from deep within the station's substructure, a place the modern schematics barely acknowledged, the old core. He presented his findings to Valerius. The commander nodded sagely. "The Foundation," he rumbled. "They built this high-tech marvel on top of a colonial-era processing unit. Laziness. The bureaucracy would rather build over than rebuild right." Valerius clapped a heavy metallic hand on Kaelen's shoulder. "The current leadership, they trust the new systems. They've forgotten the old ways. But you, boy, you see the whole picture. Go, explore the unknown. I'll make sure your access requests are expedited." With Valerius running interference, Kaelen descended into the bowels of Station Erebos. It was a journey back in time. The sleek, sterile corridors of the upper levels gave way to pitted iron and thick, coiled cables. Here, the air was heavy with the smell of ozone and neglect. This was the unknown place, a tomb of forgotten technology. At its heart sat the station's original atmospheric processor, a colossal, silent machine from a bygone era. It had been decommissioned for decades, a resource so useless it served only as a structural support for the decks above. Its power conduits were severed, its control panels dark. Yet, as Kaelen ran his diagnostic tools, he felt a faint hum, a whisper of energy that had no right to be there. For several loops, he dedicated himself to this ghost. He found faded engineering diagrams printed on polymer sheets, a language of mechanics he understood better than the coded chatter of the cyborgs. Valerius would check in on him, offering encouragement. "You're close, I can feel it," the commander would say. "The data director thinks this is a waste of time. He wants to run station-wide diagnostics that will erase everyone's short-term memory for a week. But I'm holding him off. I believe in you, Kaelen." Valerius was a bulwark, a hero. He was protecting Kaelen's work, championing the outsider against the rigid, unseeing leadership. The trust Kaelen placed in him was a small warm thing in the cold, repeating emptiness. He redoubled his efforts, driven by the commander's faith. He felt he was not just fixing a machine, but repaying a debt, proving his worth. He was still a follower, but now he followed with purpose, convinced he was on the path to salvation.
Chapter 3. The Simple, Silly Truth. The 30th loop, or was it the 40th? The number had begun to lose its meaning, dissolving into a singular, continuous now. Kaelen's melancholy had calcified into a quiet, steely resolve. He knew every bolt and panel of the old atmospheric processor. He had traced every dead wire and mapped every dormant system. The hum was real. It was a low-frequency vibration, almost subliminal, emanating from the processor's primary resonance chamber. According to the ancient diagrams, the chamber housed a series of crystalline frequency generators used to ionize the station's original atmosphere. They were, for all intents and purposes, industrial-grade tuning forks. The chamber was sealed with a heavy magnetic lock that required a physical key, a key that had been lost for half a century. This was the wall. The source of the problem was locked away. In a moment of despair during one loop, he confessed his failure to Valerius. The old cyborg looked at him, his optical eye whirring softly. "No lock is perfect, Kaelen. No system is without its flaw. Think. What is the one thing no one would ever consider?" The words returned to Kaelen on the next cycle as he stood before the sealed chamber. He looked not at the lock, but at the housing around it. He saw the maintenance seams, the emergency release bolts rusted into place. He spent that entire loop applying penetrating oil, using a torque wrench he'd found in a forgotten toolkit. As the final moments of the cycle ticked away before the conduit in hydroponics was due to burst, he put all his weight on the wrench. With a groan of protesting metal, a bolt sheared. The reset hit. He awoke with the knowledge of his success. He repeated the process, and this time freed all 4 bolts. The heavy plate swung open. Inside, bathed in the glow of his work lamp, was a large quartz-like crystal the size of a man's head. And it was vibrating, not from energy from the station, but with a resonant frequency of its own, amplified by the chamber's acoustics. He looked closer and saw the source of it all, the grand catastrophic flaw at the heart of their endless day. A small secondary resonator crystal, no bigger than his thumb, had fallen from its mounting socket atop the main crystal. It was rattling around on the surface, its vibrations creating the harmonic feedback that was confusing the station's master clock. The problem wasn't a complex virus or an act of temporal sabotage. It was a loose part. With a shaking hand, Kaelen reached in. He picked up the small crystal and pushed its base back into the socket. It clicked into place. The hum stopped. The silence was deafening. And in that silence, a new sound began, the chime of a system alert on a previously dark control panel. The processor, its core function no longer disrupted, had rebooted a dormant diagnostic subsystem. On the screen, a single log file appeared. File designation V-manip. Date, the day before the loops began. Kaelen opened it. It was a simple command entry. Disengage _crystal _maglock, open brackets, res-2, closed brackets.
followed by a video file from a hidden maintenance camera. He played it. He saw a figure in the chamber, a figure who had used a key. The figure reached up and deliberately, carefully loosened the small crystal from its socket. The figure then turned to the camera and Kaelen's blood ran cold. It was Commander Valerius. His face, half metal, half flesh, was set in a grim, determined expression. He was not destroying the station, he was creating a problem that only a certain kind of mind, a mind like his, a mind he was grooming, could solve. He was manufacturing a crisis to expose the current director's incompetence, and with Kaelen as his unwitting tool, emerge as the station's savior and rightful leader. The simple, silly fix had not only ended the loop, it had unlocked the truth. The poetic justice was staggering. The very instrument of Valerius's betrayal held the record of his crime. As the station klaxons began to blare, a new sound for a new day, and security forces, automatically alerted by the system log, descended into the old core to apprehend a stunned Valerius, Kaelen stood alone in the sudden, shocking quiet. He had saved them. He had exposed the villain who pretended to be a hero. He had won the battle for leadership, but not for himself. And as he looked at his hands, the hands that fixed the machine and doomed his mentor, he was faced with the final, haunting question that would follow him into all the tomorrows he had just unlocked. Who, in the end, was truly responsible for the outcome? The man who laid the trap, or the follower who chose to spring it?